Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be part of Google On Air, and it's a real special treat for me to be able to introduce my colleague and good friend, Tanya Avrith. Tanya is really a hugely passionate about education and everything that technology as a tool for learning has to offer, not only teachers and students, but administrators as well. Tanya is based out of Florida, and she is an instructional strategist. So she really works with school leaders and teachers and students on how to transform learning in your school, in your district for 21st century. She and I worked together at the Leslie Pearson School Board in Montreal, and she started our digital citizenship program, which really we're quite renowned for, and a lot of her work. There's a piece in Ribble's book about digital citizenship. So she's going to talk to you about that, and she's going to talk to you about workflow, and you're really in for an amazing half hour on how to transform what you're doing in your school district. So I turn you over to Tanya.
Thank you so much, Kim, for such a warm welcome and introduction. I'm so excited to be here today to speak to you about best practices for implementing Google for Education, instructional implementation. I'm very passionate about this area, and I'm going to just share my screen and start my slides. So if you're here today, I'd love to connect with you as well on the question Q&A. So please feel free to ask questions as you wish. As Kim mentioned, I am a pedagogical consultant. I work with schools and districts all over Canada and the US. And today I'd like to just begin, if you're on, if you could tell me a little bit about you and introduce yourself and tell me where you're from. If you go into the little Q&A area, please feel free. I'm checking it continuously, so I'm looking forward to getting to know who is watching today. So I want to start just a little bit with my journey and how I came to be where I am today in terms of implementation of Google Apps. So in 2012, I had the awesome opportunity of attending the Google Teacher Academy in New York. And when I began that journey, I was working at the Lester B. Pearson School Board in Montreal, and I had actually used Google Apps with students, but never realized the full potential of adopting it as a district. At the time, it was still unknown to me, which is crazy to me when I think about how far we've come. That year, and if you're a Google certified innovator, or you know that you create an action plan. So my action plan that year, when I left, was that I was going to get one class using Google Apps. It was one class. So that year we went back, we started with one class, and now 4 years later, our entire school district in the province of Quebec is the first, and I think if I'm not mistaken, only fully adopted Google Apps for Education school district in the province of Quebec. So we came a long way from that 2012 first introduction to what the power of Google was. And along the way, I have learned quite a bit about some best practices in terms of implementing Google for Education, or G Suite, as a school or district for that matter. And today, I'm going to share that journey and some best practices. So I see some of you coming from different places, Indiana and Ohio, and from Orlando. Hi, Evelyn. So I'm very excited to have you on today. So I'd love for you in the chat as well, if you use just the hashtag #MyJourney, so I can see that you're speaking about this. Just tell me a little bit about where you are in your school's journey. Are you just beginning? Are you sort of in the thick of it, but kind of getting going? Or perhaps are you more of a ninja? Are you kind of already there and looking for some more tips? So I'd love to get some insight in terms of where you are in your journey. So today, what I'm going to be speaking about is establishing some really great instructional best practices. And the three that are often probably the most integral when you're implementing G Suite in your school are establishing a strong pedagogical foundation for teaching and learning, establishing a positive digital culture, and establishing a workflow efficiency, understanding how you will navigate using a digital workflow. And when these three areas are present and thoughtfully planned out, you're bound to have a much more, I guess, an easier implementation. When one of these pieces is missing, you're not really set up for success. So obviously, pedagogy will always drive the technology, and it should always drive the technology. It should never be the other way around. And this is a huge, huge, huge topic. And quite frankly, I could probably speak about this for days and days. So for the sake of today's session, I'm actually going to just be covering the bottom two pieces. However, I have a shout out for my friend, Kim, whose session is at 4:30, and she'll address this more in detail. So I encourage you to go and check out her session on assessment that matters. So I'm going to address, to start, the idea around building a positive digital culture. And this is really, really important when you're establishing an initiative with any technology. It doesn't even mean it has to be, Google Apps, but for any technology initiative for that matter. And for me, this began in 2010 when we first decided that we were going to shift over our thinking around teaching and learning and how we use technology at the Lester B. Pearson School Board. And that year was a huge shift for us because we were really a lockdown. I used to call it the lockdown organization. Our institution, you could not search for very much. When you were looking online, YouTube was blocked. Things were really, really blocked down. And so it was not an environment that was trusting of our teachers and students, and nor was it allowing us to teach students the necessary literacies that they needed to function in the 21st century. And so when we first decided to introduce a digital citizenship program, at first, the temptation was really just to teach these lessons about kids being safe online. And what I had noticed over time was that when we do that, what we're really doing is really like vaccinating our students of digital citizenship. We're just kind of giving them a one-off inoculation, but not really giving them all the different elements that are necessary for them to be successful. And I realized very quickly that digital citizenship really couldn't be this thing that you just added on to your curriculum or added into your day. It really had to be about a shift in the way you thought about technology and the way that you thought about social media and the access and connections that you're allowing your students to have. And those experiences are so important because they need to be able to live it. And so as learners, we realized very quickly that these learners really, digital citizenship is really about teaching kids how to be digitally literate. So we want to teach our students how to effectively consume information, critically consume information. And we saw that as a huge factor during this election. If you've seen some of the articles that had come up around students not being able to distinguish the difference between fake and real news, how to be researchers online, how to be effective researchers, how to curate their digital lives. I mean, we have no problems teaching our kids how to organize a 3-ring binder, but we spend very little time teaching them how to curate their digital lives. How to be creators in a time, in an age where visual media and visual communication is so important. How do we design for an audience? Do we teach our students how to be empathetic of the viewers that are actually the viewers or the audience that we're actually creating for? And most importantly, are we teaching our students how to harness the power of social media? Are we teaching them how to connect their learning to an authentic audience so that they actually understand and live the experience of being online in a positive way? So these were really important elements that we had to consider when we were thinking about shifting our entire process to a more digital environment, because this is important as digital learners in the 21st century. So the question then that we've started to look at, and a good question for you to consider as a school leader, is what is your school story? Or what story would you like to tell? Because these are two very different distinctions. What is your school story is something that you're not controlling, rather than what story would you like to tell is the one that you want to be in charge of. And using social media is your vehicle to getting there. So when we think about a true 21st century school, a true 21st century school is one that's proactive and not reactive. So really establishing a strong foundation around an implementation of digital citizenship and digital literacy, and having a plan that you are front-facing, even if it's a PR plan that you have in place, is so important when you're thinking about moving your school over and really beginning to truly be able to harness the power of the technology. So the first thing that we had to address as our district was our policy. Because I very often when I work in schools and I consult in schools, and schools are thinking about shifting over to a more collaborative 21st century teaching and learning approach, the first thing that I ask them is, well, what does your policy say? Is your policy very, very limiting? Does it allow for students to be able to use social media? Does it allow for your teachers to be able to share and celebrate the work and the creations of their learners in school? And very often when I work in schools, this is not the case. Policies really need to be lifted and kind of freed up. And we have to really look at how we are, yes, of course, protecting our students and our teachers, but without limiting their voice and their ability to be these 21st century leaders and learners. So understanding that, well, is social media something that you allow in your school? Is it something that is encouraged? Is it something that's allowed? And if it's not, then perhaps this is something that you want to be able to look at and really thoughtfully think about, because without the ability to share your story, you're not in control of it. So when we first began truly implementing at a school level, the very first thing that we began to do, and probably what we realized had the biggest impact, was having our schools and the teachers in their schools have students every single year create student-driven acceptable use guidelines. So the language is owned by the learners. The language is meaningful because it's the words of our students. And when we empower our students to be part of this process, they will take much more of the responsibility for it. And they will understand that when something happens, that this was something that they owned. They have ownership of it. And it's been the most powerful thing that I could ever have done when working with schools. When this is not done, I always notice that there's a lot more issues that you're going to have with your students in their school. And what we do is we have the students create posters, and they look different and for the most part per grade level. And there's variations of how you might do it, but it is completely owned by the learner, and it's done every single year when you start the beginning of the school year. The other thing that I've started to do this year was I've started to build empathy using Innovators Compass, which is this wonderful strategy for really building empathy and designing and understanding of how to design different, you know, experiences, or like how to build empathy through this design thinking process. And it was created by Ella Ben-Ur, and I highly recommend that you go and check out her work. But we started doing that in this year, and we saw such incredible feedback from the students and their experiences of using technology, and their observations and what was important to them. And what we did, and what I did, was I had students do this in a freshman class of about 250 students. They went through the Innovators Compass to really for me to really get a sense of what their thinking was in terms of the people that were impacted by their use of technology and social media, what their personal observations were, what was most important to them, and what their ideas were in terms of using technology. And what we did with that feedback was we created a course that was based on their feedback, what was important to them, what we were finding that were the common thread of themes. And so as a freshman class, I created a course for all the freshmen to take, which basically was about a 2-hour course that they had to go through that looked at different elements of digital citizenship, and had them really creating at the end. So this was a really powerful experience because the course was developed based on their voice. And this is so key when you are implementing any kind of positive culture in your school. Having student voice is so, so important. The other thing that I have seen done, and this is from my friend Evelyn, and she's out at Park Maitland School, which is a wonderful school in Orlando, and to encourage students to have the experiences as digital citizens in action. Every Thursday, the Twitter account at the school gets taken over by the 6th grade students, and they're taught, you know, how to be responsible. They have press badges and they walk around the school, and they're so proud, and they're really understanding what it means to be a digital citizen. So it's incredibly powerful. Another really powerful example of establishing a positive digital culture is another school that I work with out in Miami called Gulliver. It's an independent school in Miami, but this could be done in public school as well. And a year ago, we established a really strong culture around learning as a professional network of learners with all the faculty. And so if you check out #GSLearning, you'll see the incredible creations of their students and the community of learners that's emerged, and has really shifted the culture of teaching and learning as a whole, just by sort of really encouraging and really embracing social media as an entire school body. The second area that is so key to think about when we're implementing an effective implementation of Google Apps specifically, or G Suite, is thinking about workflow efficiency. In this case, I'm going to address this from a leadership perspective, but you could definitely look at how this could apply to your classroom as well if you're here as a classroom teacher. So workflow generally, for the most part, just really means like, how are you navigating the use of the technology? And you would have workflow in a day-to-day if you were having students or teachers hand things in. You would know that the teachers are going to take the papers and from their students, and they're going to put it in a folder, and you're going to take it and you're going to correct it. But when you're navigating in a digital space, if you haven't really thoughtfully organized as a team that workflow, it becomes extremely complicated for all the different people that are building an understanding of how they're using that technology. So I encourage, as a school leader, that you lead what that looks like, because you want to be able to have a unified workflow. In my opinion, from the schools that I've worked at, when there's a unified workflow for your teachers, and that they also understand that they're going to use with their students, it eliminates a lot of the confusion and then the kind of useless confusion around, how do I turn this in? What do I name it? Those are things that shouldn't be important. They should just kind of be established from the very beginning of the school year as part of your procedures, so that you understand what you're doing as you move forward. So some of the tools that I have found that are incredibly powerful for curating and helping with workflow are Google Keep, Google Slides, Google Forms, and Google Docs. And of course I could speak about forms, but for the sake of time, I'm going to quickly address how I've used these 4 tools with schools that I've worked on to help improve workflow and organization with all the different stakeholders at the school. So I'm going to start very quickly with Google Keep, which in my opinion might be one of the most underutilized tools and probably one of my very favorite tools on the planet. I use this religiously. I would not live without it. I have everything color-coded. So when I work with different schools, all of my schools have different colors, and I'm able to set up my lists of my tasks, and I share them with all the different stakeholders, all the different people that I'm collaborating with, so that we are all able to work collaboratively together and we know where everyone stands, and I'm able to assign different tasks to different people. As you can see, I have the plus William, plus Aileen. And so this really helps organize the things that you have going on as a team, but also think about that as a teacher, being able to help students with executive functioning issues, students who have ADHD. This is an incredible strategy for them to be able to learn how to get organized and structure their assignments. And you can also attach your Google Docs in there and they'll show up. So like if you have something to work on, it will remind you. So it's a really powerful tool. The other one is utilizing Google Sites. I love Google Sites. I cannot imagine my life now without the new Google Sites, because it's just so straightforward and so easy to use. And the ability to be able to put everything that you need in one place is so powerful. I like the idea of even using Google Sites as a place to teach out of, even if it's for a lesson or a unit, if you wanted to use it as an instructional tool. But in terms of being as a school leader, recently what I did to streamline communication at one of the schools that I work with, I created a Google site and I added all the different departments. This is where like all the different notes and minutes will be housed. All the different documents will be housed. And I aligned that with a Google Sheet so that when they are, this is going to be embedded on the site, they know they have different things that are going on. Everything gets put into the sheet. Everything that we're working on, anything that's going on in the entire school can be found on this site and in this sheet. And then from that, you can have announcements, you can have different things that are kind of going on as a school body, and it's so straightforward to set up. So this has been incredibly powerful. Another thing that I've used is Google Forms, and I use Google Forms to help, sorry, not Google Forms, I apologize, Google Docs. I use Google Docs, I use HyperDocs, which I think that there was a session on HyperDocs with Lisa Heifel and the girls, or if not, check that out. It's wonderful. But I use Google HyperDocs to organize all of the professional development sessions that are happening at the school. And I have the same criteria that I use. I set up the learning objective, the success criteria, and then so they're blended courses. So every week when we meet for professional development every single Wednesday, the teachers are then able to go in to the Grandview teacher learning program, and every single week they have their different sessions. So the goal is that eventually, as the year progresses, we have built capacity so that when new teachers come, we could essentially have these blended online kind of flipped courses so that all of our professional development is really streamlined and our messaging and what we believe in is really evident to everyone who comes in, and you've organized what that looks like from year to year to year. And the way that we use Google Classroom, which is an amazing class kind of organization tool, and we use it all together, is I have the Grandview PD and resources, and I have all of the teachers on this classroom, and I have every week, this is kind of the hub where I put out the different assignments, and they can use this as a place to add comments, to ask questions, to share ideas. So this becomes kind of that classroom hub. So these are some of the ideas that I've shared. Obviously half an hour is really, really tough, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions. But it's just so important to know that obviously there's no magic switch. Doing implementation and having a plan is very personal. Your school environment, your culture of your school is very personal, and it's never like a one size fits all. So hopefully I've given you some strategies and things that you can use in your schools tomorrow. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. I'm happy to help. I really do love what I do, and I'm really passionate about helping transform teaching and learning using technology and good practice. So if you have any questions, please feel free. I'm going to just go back to there we are. So hi there. So we just have about 4 minutes. So I'm going to go into the questions, and I'm going to see if there's anything that you have. I see that you're definitely from different places, and that you're in the process of perhaps implementing Chromebooks, or kind of getting started and feeling confident. So I'm just kind of wondering if you have any questions. I'm really excited to be able to answer them. So please feel free to put some questions in there. I'm not really seeing any, unless Kim has, someone talked about how to bring staff on board. Oh, that's a very good question. So, building a culture that is conducive to a positive culture of bringing people aboard. The truth is, I usually will start with a lot of my early adopters. I try to really encourage them to, go to their neighbor, help, ask one way that the technology could really help them in a way that's not giving them more work to do, but really, helping their work get done faster. Something that's going to really encourage them to not see it as an add-on. Let's see. What do you think about using YouTube as an instructional tool and then use Google Apps for training? I love YouTube, and I think embedding that as part of, let's say, a Google site as a course is really powerful. And that's how I was planning on using all the different organization and workflow, because I use the HyperDoc as kind of the hub to structure the different pieces of the class. And then I put that inside of a Google site. And then through that, I use YouTube as the place where I'm putting all the different, and housing all the different flipped videos, and then linking them into the HyperDoc so that everything is kind of organized and structured in one place. One of the other question is how to share learning portfolios. So this is a huge passion, and oh my gosh, I have 2 minutes left, so where to begin? One thing to think about when you're sharing learning portfolios, if you want to think about the workflow, especially with the new Google Sites, I have the students, I have teachers using one slide deck as a template for process. So getting the kids to put in day to day to day all the different things that they're working on, taking snapshots of their learning, and then sharing that into embedding it in their site. And then having one big site where you have maybe pictures of all the kids that are linked to their personal sites, and then using perhaps a class Twitter account to share those out. So that's like, to me, one of the most exciting ways that you could do it. And then maybe embedding a Google form where you would be able to share that through the class Twitter account to get comments for the different blog posts from the portfolio. So I have to leave you today. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thank you so much for joining. And you can reach me at Tanya@tanyavrith.com or at Tanya Avrith on Twitter. So good luck with your implementation. Thank you so much.